My name is Daniel Briggs. I'm 38 years old. And up until recently, I thought my life was in a pretty good place. I'd been married for over a decade, owned a home, paid off with the help of a federal program, had a stable job as a hospital maintenance technician in Lexington, Kentucky, and a wife with whom I shared not just a roof but an entire history. Her name was Claire, and our story felt like it came straight out of a simple romance novel, the kind that starts in a library, moves slowly, builds roots, and never sees the storm coming. I met Claire in a public library on a cold autumn afternoon. She was organizing books in the American literature section and had this look that said, "Quiet, please." I kept going back for months, coming up with excuses to ask about authors I didn't even know. The first time she smiled at me, I knew there was something there. It didn't take long before we moved in together. We bought a modest house in the suburbs and built our little routines. Old movies on Sundays, pancakes with honey, handwritten grocery lists, and that Norah Jones song she always played on Saturday mornings. Our marriage was low-key. I handled the finances. She took care of the house, the garden, the birthday calendar. But the first cracks showed up when her dad, Mr. Richard, had a stroke. Claire was understandably shaken, and I offered to help take care of him. I used my technical skills to set up monitoring equipment at home, adjusted my shifts, prepared special meals, stayed up through the night. She thanked me, called me a hero, but her eyes stopped meeting mine. At first I figured it was just exhaustion, the stress of seeing her dad in that condition, but then she started pulling away more and more. First came the excuses. "I'm staying at my parents' tonight. I need some time alone. There's an extra meeting with the foundation." Then came the details. New makeup, new clothes, new scents, and the most obvious, emotional distance. I knew something was off, not because I'm jealous, but because I've learned to read the signs, at the hospital and in life. Instead of confronting her, I started preparing, quietly. I opened a bank account at a different branch, moved part of my paycheck over, took important documents out of the house, deed to the house, contracts, insurance policies, and stored them in a rented safe deposit box. My late mother's engagement ring, my grandfather's watch, small pieces of my story I wasn't willing to lose. 2 weeks later, during a morning shift, I got the email. Subject line, "Let's stay mature." The message itself, cold and to the point, just 4 lines. Claire said she'd already started the divorce process, was living with someone else, had removed her name from our joint account, and thought it best to keep things calm and dignified. I read the email sitting in a break room next to an empty coffee machine. I felt a pressure in my chest, not anger, but something deeper, colder. I replied with just one word. Understood. But Claire didn't know everything. What she didn't realize was that people who pay attention to the details tend to see what others try to hide. A week later, I checked our joint account. The balance, $13.75. The statement showed a series of transfers to a name I'd never heard before, Colin W. Evans. Some small, others for large amounts, totaling over $20,000. Something wasn't adding up. I called an old friend of my brother-in-law's, Bradley Monroe, a lawyer, ex-military, now a civil litigation specialist. I brought him everything. The bank statements, copies of the house documents, screenshots of the email. He listened in silence, and then said, "She moved the pieces around like she was just rearranging furniture, but she forgot one thing. The deed's still in your name, and that changes everything." That's when everything started to shift. Bradley Monroe took less than 2 days to come back with something solid. Claire had tried to refinance our house using a forged signature. And not only that, she filled out documents using the wrong middle initial. She put Daniel M. Briggs instead of Daniel L. It might seem like a minor detail, but legally, that slip-up was what stopped us from losing the property and turned her from a hurt wife into a documented fraudster. And there was more. Colin W. Evans's name came up in connection with 3 properties sold in Chicago and Toledo for suspiciously low prices. The paperwork was always questionable, and each case involved recently separated women who had ties to the military. A pattern was starting to form, and Claire was right in the middle of it, way deeper than she let on. I set up a legal alert for any movement involving the house, but I didn't stop there. I reconnected to the home security system. She must have forgotten the cameras automatically backed up footage to the cloud. And there he was, Colin walking in using the door code, pouring himself whiskey from my favorite bottle, flipping through channels on my remote like he owned the place. And Claire, showing up just after, smiling. Not a guilty smile. The kind of smile you give when you've already moved on before saying goodbye. I sent everything to Monroe. And waited. I kept visiting her dad at the hospital. Mr. Richard could barely speak, but he'd smile when I walked in. He still called me son. Sometimes he'd hold my hand tight when I adjusted his pillow. I wasn't going there for Claire, I was going for him. And maybe for myself. Because even after everything, I needed to know I hadn't become what she seemed to think I was. Disposable. Then one day Claire showed up at the hospital room door. Hair tied back, dark dress, guarded expression. We stood in silence for a few seconds, like any word could detonate something. She simply said, "Thank you for still coming." And after a pause, more quietly, "I just wanted to feel free." There was no anger in her voice, no regret, just this kind of emptiness. I replied with a look, and I left. That same day, Monroe called me. "We've got everything." Colin had signed contracts with a local real estate agency. There were already interior photos of the house being passed around to potential buyers. A listing was about to go live on a site known for quick cash sales. We sent everything to the DA's office and to the bank handling the refinance, who by that point had already frozen the funds. That night, I got a message from Claire. "Can we talk? I just want to explain." I didn't reply. Instead, I turned on the cameras and watched. That's when the trap closed. The next day, Claire left the house at 9:45 a.m., maybe to meet me, maybe not. But minutes later, Colin showed up with a woman, a real estate agent. I watched it all through the cameras, photos being taken, floor plans sketched out, him pointing at every corner of the room. "We'll list it at $470, but I've already got a buyer lined up for $420. Cash, like always." "And the husband?" the agent asked. "He'll make noise, but he'll take a deal. They always do." I recorded everything, sent it to the district attorney. 15 minutes later, I saw the black FBI SUVs surround the house. Agents going in, muffled shouting. Claire showed up shortly after, totally confused. She stopped on the sidewalk, hands over her face, eyes wide with shock. My phone rang. It was Agent Catherine Patel from the Financial Crimes Division. "Mr. Briggs, we have the recordings, the documents, the bank transfers, the forged signatures, the bank's testimony, and now we have video of a fraudulent sale in progress. The case is sealed. Conspiracy, fraud, forgery." She paused. "Your ex-wife just arrived. She's shaken. What would you like us to do about her?" I looked at the camera feed. Claire was trembling. But there was something important in that image. She wasn't scared because she didn't understand. She was scared because she knew it was over, and that there was no rewriting it now. I answered, "I don't want revenge. I just want the truth to be clear. I want her to pay what's fair. I want the real story to be told." The FBI executed everything with military precision. Colin W. Evans was caught red-handed in the living room of what used to be my house, holding fraudulent contracts, property photos, and call records he never thought would be recorded. The real estate agent was arrested too, and then 3 more women came forward, victims of the same scheme in different states, all married to military men, all with homes manipulated during or just after their husband's deployment. The DA's office built the case quickly, and when the evidence stacked up like bricks ready to crush any denial, Claire took a deal. She pled guilty to indirect involvement, claimed she didn't know everything, and agreed to pay back the full amount of the refinancing, give up any claim to the house and my pension, and sign a written confession admitting to the forgery. In exchange, she got probation, supervised and barred from working in any role involving contracts or official documentation. I was in the courtroom the day she signed the agreement, not because I needed to look her in the eyes, but because I wanted to end this chapter being fully present. Claire didn't look at me, and somehow, that said more than any apology ever could. Outside, Bradley Monroe handed me the final documents. "It's all yours again. Clean." I stared at the folder for a few seconds. The house, the bank account, my name, my life. It was all legally restored, but none of it felt like mine. Not yet. Not after everything. That night I got a message from Claire. "Can we talk? I just want to explain." I didn't reply. Instead, I turned on the cameras and watched. And that's when the trap snapped shut. The next morning, Claire left the house at 9:45, maybe thinking she was going to meet me. But minutes later, Colin showed up with a woman, a real estate agent. I watched through the cameras, photos being taken, floor plans sketched out, him pointing to every corner of the living room. We'll list it at $470, but I've already got a buyer ready for $420. Cash, as usual. And the husband? The agent asked. He'll kick up some dust, but he'll settle. They always do. I recorded everything, sent it to the district attorney. 15 minutes later, I watched black FBI vehicles surround the house. Agents rushed in, muffled shouting. Claire arrived soon after, confused, standing on the sidewalk with her hands covering her face, shock in her eyes. My phone rang. It was Agent Catherine Patel from the Financial Crimes Unit. Mr. Briggs, we've got the footage, the documents, the bank transactions, the forged signatures, the bank's testimony, and now we've got video of a fraudulent sale. It's a done case, conspiracy, fraud, forgery. She paused for a second. Your ex-wife just showed up. She's shaken. What would you like us to do? I looked at the camera. Claire was trembling. But the important detail was this. She wasn't scared because she didn't understand. She was scared because she knew it was over, and there was no more rewriting it. I said, I'm not looking for revenge. I just want the truth to be clear. I want her to pay what's fair. I want the real story to be told. The FBI moved with military precision. Colin W., and when the evidence stacked up like bricks, heavy enough to crush any lie, Claire took a plea deal. She admitted to indirect involvement, claimed she didn't know everything, and agreed to repay the full amount from the refinance, give up any claim to the house or my pension, and sign a confession admitting the forgery. In return, she got probation, supervised, and permanently barred from handling any contracts or official documents. I was in court the day she signed the deal. Not because I needed to look her in the eyes, but because I needed to be there when this chapter finally closed. Claire didn't look at me, and somehow, that said more than any apology could. Outside, Bradley Monroe handed me the final paperwork. It's all yours again, clean. I stared at the folder for a few seconds, the house, the bank account, my name, my life. It was all legally mine again, but none of it felt like mine. Not yet. Not after everything. That's why I decided to sell the house anyway. Not for revenge, but because every corner of that place carried echoes of a story where I was silently erased. Every kitchen tile reminded me of a night we smiled over frozen lasagna, while she was already planning her exit. Every closed cabinet held more than pots and pans, it held absence. I used part of the sale to buy a small property up north in Bozeman, Montana. A simple cabin, 2 bedrooms surrounded by old trees and a creek that runs behind it. The silence here is different. It's not the silence of loneliness. It's the silence of rebuilding. I turned the shed on the property into a woodworking studio, started crafting tables, benches, one-of-a-kind pieces from reclaimed wood. No rush, no noise. I'd post photos on Instagram with short poetic captions. And out of nowhere I started getting messages from people saying, "Your wood feels like it holds stories." They had no idea how true that was. One day, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, in a yellow envelope from Colorado Springs. The sender was Emily Carson, wife of a Navy sergeant who nearly lost their home in a scam just like mine. She wrote, "You don't know me, but thanks to your case, ours never went through. My husband doesn't even know, he's deployed, but when he gets back our home will still be there. Thank you for existing." I read the letter twice. Then I grabbed a nail, a piece of wood, and pinned that letter to the wall of my workshop. Right there, between tools and sawdust, I hung a reminder that not everything broken becomes useless. Claire wrote me one last time, an email. "I hope you're doing well. I'm trying to start over in Ohio. I heard you moved. I didn't want things to end like that." I didn't reply, not out of pride, but because sometimes what needs to be said is already written in what goes unsaid. 2 months later, I found a letter tucked away in a drawer from the old house. It was from her father, written before the stroke. It was addressed to me. "Daniel, if I'm ever not around anymore, I want you to know. You were more of a son than I ever deserved. Thank you for taking care of my daughter, even when she forgot to take care of you." I cried when I read it, not out of sadness, but for the sense of closure, like hearing the last note of a song that had been playing on loop for way too long. These days I live simply. I build furniture. I walk with my dog, Scout, a 6-month-old German Shepherd I adopted. Sometimes I sit on the porch with a strong cup of coffee and watch the wind stir through the trees. I don't think about Claire with bitterness anymore. I think of her with a strange kind of gratitude. because it was in the moment she erased me that I started writing myself back. If you're still here with me, I'm guessing you felt the weight of this story the way I did. So go ahead and subscribe, not because someone's telling you to, but because here, you'll find stories like yours. Stories that aren't perfect, but that carry some kind of truth. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been written out of your own story by someone who said they loved you? Have you had to rebuild on your own what someone else tore down with both hands? Share it with us. This space is yours too.